fact from history or verifiable history, legend. And for women, sometimes you're not remembered at all, or you're remembered for something you didn't actually do. So this is a survey done. It was a professor in Buffalo teaching American history, first half of American history. So he wanted to gauge, every year from 75 to 88, he wanted to gauge what his students knew about American history, or who they thought were important. So one of the questions he would ask, write down the first 10 names you think of, excluding presidents, generals, statesmen. All right, so at the very top, Betsy Ross. All right? So for these students, Betsy Ross is the most significant female figure in the first half of American history. That's because she's in most. All right, now there are other women on this list, but click again. 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 Oh, no, back up again. Sorry, I missed one. Sorry, back up again. Sorry. Back up again. All right. So you have Martha Washington, right? Because there are other women, but I'm just focused on the Revolutionary women. So they mention Martha, yay, but they also mention, where'd she go? M. Pitcher. Molly Pitcher. Not really a real person. All right, go for it. All right. Molly Pitcher is really a personification of women's service in the battlefield, right? So the idea of women as camp followers. There's a battle. You run out with pitchers of water to pull down cannons or to give water to men. So there's a lot of women who served as, in this role. It's kind of attuned to Rosie the Riveter. There are a lot of Rosie the Riveters, right? All those women who entered into the war industries in World War II, we call Rosie Riveters. Doesn't matter if they riveted planes or not. This idea is the general name for all these women who went into the war industries. So Molly Pitcher really is a personification of all the things that women did, right? In carrying water into the battlefield. It wasn't until the 1850s where they tried to identify who was the real Molly Pitcher. It's like trying to identify who's the real Rosie the Riveter. So they do give credit to Mary Ludwig Hayes, who often gets credit as being the Molly Pitcher from the Battle of Monmouth. But soldiers who were at that battlefield write about a lot of women carrying water, right? But they give credit to her, though there were a lot of women who filled this role. So the idea that Molly Pitcher is a name that these students knew, but it's like saying Rosie the Riveter. It's just the kind of general concept of the roles that women did. All right, click forward. Betsy. For those students, right, and from the 70s and the 80s, which makes sense because the centennial, right, the bicentennial, in the 70s. No evidence that she made that first flag. George Washington doesn't talk about it. She doesn't make it in any of it. It's just not in the Continental Congressional records. Timing doesn't match up. If she was supposed to happen in June of 1776, the idea that George wasn't in Philadelphia, so it doesn't match up. Nobody knows who Betsy Ross is until her grandson in 1870 is speaking in front of the Pennsylvania Historical Society, saying, "I want to tell you about my grandmother." And she said this first flag. And she was the one that made it the 5-pointed star. The idea was really supposed to be 6, but no, she said the 5-pointed star would just be easier, and why don't we do this? Nobody's heard that story until he talks about it. I have sworn affidavits from everybody in my family that my grandmother did this. It appears in Harper's Monthly. So she becomes this key kind of, it's the idea that we needed founding mothers, right? Had all these founding fathers, needed founding mothers, and one that did it, who was a founding mother in a traditional sense, right? She picked up a sewing needle, not a gun. especially for the 19th century, made her very appealing, that she was a hero, but yet in a very kind of feminine way. So there's no evidence that she did that. But Betsy Ross did do some cool stuff, right? There's stuff that we can verify that she did. She made flags for the Navy. So she may not have made, she is a seamstress running her own business, that's true. Her husband, John Ross, is killed, he dies of illness during the Revolution, but she will remarry before the war is over. But in the meantime, she's doing it on her own. She's making signal flags for the Navy, we do know that. She made tents for the Navy, we do know that. I mean, for the Army, we do know that, as a seamstress. She's also was evidence of her nursing soldiers after a battle outside of Philadelphia. So she did some cool stuff, right? But she's not remembered for that. She's not remembered for stuff that she might have really done. She's remembered for the myth of her. All right, click forward. Even the Betsy Ross house hedges. All right, she's like, yeah, okay. So historical fact or well-loved legend, come spend money at our tourist attraction, right? So they even admit that it's hedged, but people want to go, even if it is a myth, we still want to go. And they always portray her as older. Betsy was 24 years old. During the, she's in her early 20s during the Revolution, but they always want to portray her as this older woman. She was in her early 20s. All right, so it's an interesting thing. So that's why what's so great about just women's history in general, but is trying to, how much of it do we honor these women for the cool stuff they really did, but they're being honored for stuff they didn't really do. So it's it's an interesting journey when you're doing women's history, especially when you're trying to break it during wartime. You're trying to peel the history from the legend. All right, that's all I have. So thank you. I'll answer any questions that you may have. Any questions?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Is there a question? Yeah.
Yeah, the two women that received the pensions,
Yeah.
did they receive them in their male name or in their
Female name.
real name?
Their real name. Corbin in a real name, and so did Deborah. By then, she's already kind of famous. With Deborah, they also, the idea is Paul Revere was a kind of big fan of hers and promoted, so she would get her pension. But essentially, it would have been because of her service as Robert. But by the time she gets the money, yeah, her identity, yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned a book about one of them.
Douglas Sampson?
Yeah, what is that book?
It was written during her lifetime, and it wasn't written by her. So I'd have to look up the title for you. But so
Yeah, let me know.
Yeah, she
Was that
was.
the Gannett? Was that the Gannett?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
there was a biography written about her, but she didn't write. So we don't know how much of it was like her digging the bullet out of her own leg. But so with these, you don't know how much is true and how much is dramatized.
The book would
It
be
makes a
nice.
good story, right? There's a lot of stories too of in the Civil War of women who disguised themselves as men and how they got away with it. It's also very fascinating.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so
Thanks.
much. Everyone, I have a couple announcements. We are on lunch break. I do encourage you to visit our incredibly delicious Porker's Barbecue for lunch. We also encourage you to go visit our encampment. We have the Montgomery County Militia, and they are brought to us by the General Hugh Mercer Sons of the American Revolution. They've traveled quite a distance, so be sure to take some pictures, share them out, encourage other people to come out. And then we will reconvene at 1:30 with the Major Samuel McCullough reenactment of John McCullough, his brother, from Jean Thorne. And then we have the Scouts of the Revolution at 2:30, And then the Montgomery County Militia will be doing a demonstration at 3:30, followed by our reading of the local Central West Virginia Revolutionary War heroes. So, if you